I guess I need the microphone for the recording. I mean, I could have done it if not like this. I'm going to be sitting down, exceptionally. It's not that I'm tired, but still that. I have my notes there. I don't usually have them, but now I need them. The idea of doing this was just to do a debrief, so I was in the plenary room there for the 2 days. I did a little animation relay with the speakers who were there, and it was suddenly trying to take a little look at what was said for a day in 2000, until not long ago, on the theme of Take for Good, which is the theme of Blend.
Take for Good, qui est le thème de Blend.
It is therefore important to give just a minimum of context on the way I look at all this. I do innovation consulting. So I usually say that there I described half of France when I said that, but I do strategic consulting rather for large groups, which also involve startups or innovation networks from time to time, but mainly on large groups and on all types of markets. So I work in both energy and vehicles. In reality, it's the same market, in IT, in luxury, in commerce, in construction, in banking. If it's legal, that's okay with me. I haven't been based in France for some time, but that's not very important. I work in Europe, that's important, and I've also been working since the late 90s, regularly in China. So this is a market that I know very little about, but that I have known very little about for a very long time. And I have clients who are there. Some are Chinese companies, few, simply because they don't call on advice much and it's complicated. There are a lot of European customers who are on site. I work quite little, or not, with the US, even if it is a market that I also know. I don't have any clients on that side. And what is interesting is someone who does innovation and who is not very geographically attached, so he can move around. In recent years, objectively, I have been drawn more towards Asia in terms of innovation playground than towards the US. It doesn't necessarily mean much, but that's what happened. So I'm just going to set the timer so that I'm not late, because then I have to go back down. We had a lot of themes discussed, which went a little in all directions, because this is the game of course, and then there is no party line on what Tech for Good means. Even tech, I think that today if we were to give our definition, we're here for the 40 minutes of discussion, we can't spend it just on that. Tech, for me, essentially means digital. Companies that use digital to have economic models that capitalize on network effects. So it's super accurate. So that means yes, from Amazon, Facebook, etc. there must be strong network effects, not just network effects towards the general public, it can be network effects between companies, it's called standardization, it can therefore be B&B, but the heart of the subject, for me, I think, is really the fact that what has created the most financial values for more than 10 years are the network effects and their ability to be, 1, explosive, and 2, then to create monopolies that are unbeatable in terms of the market. And we're going to talk about monopolies, suddenly, because it's obviously, there are connotations about for good in there. And the for good, I am like you, we can define it a little as we want, we can go from the well-being of humanity to just the simple respect of the law, standards, or decency. But if I want to be precise, would say that the for good would be, for example, if we take the US, it would be to respect something that was created in 1996, which is called the Computer Decency Act, which was actually a law that had been passed in the United States, essentially initially for pornography in social networks, but then more broadly to say we must not do things that are not decent in these new digital businesses.
Il ne faut pas faire de choses qui soient non décentes dans ces nouveaux business numériques.
And dramatically, all the major American digital groups, those that we know, who are active in our markets, have been excluded from this law. They had a derogation so as not to have to apply this law, because, roughly speaking, in order for them to develop and do their business, it was going to slow them down a little bit, it put constraints, they were going to have to ask themselves a lot of questions. Now was not the time, it was the time to do business, scale up, ramp up, take market share, and become the leaders they have become. So obviously for some time now, the question has been asking a little bit, to say, and here, if we ask them to please respect this law now after a while, so we can discuss it as much as we like, we can obviously discuss with all the effects that we have on Brexit, the elections, and whatever you want, we are all concerned by it. Okay, the for good, I think more spectacularly now and more mediatically, is also what we are starting to have as a release of this digital economy that was created in the United States and of which we are very participants, because we love it, we are very, very customers of it.
Dont nous sommes très participants, parce qu'on adore ça, on est très très clients de ça.
And what I was saying yesterday at the start of the plenary, WeWork, industrial disaster.
Catastrophe industrielle.
So obviously we've all become super smart, and we're all thinking now, well, yeah, of course it was real estate, it wasn't tech. So what are they when investors? A little more complicated than that. Obviously, WeWork, for quite a few years, we haven't been that smart, even if there were voices saying, but still, it's real estate. And in general we were answered, yes, but shut up, you don't really understand what it's about. They have a vision. They have a vision and they have been funded by a fund called Vision Fund, which is a Japanese fund. So in fact, it is a Japanese who is the leader of this, and a fund that is financed by money that comes from Saudi Arabia, almost purely. So a Japanese guy, go to the United Arab Emirates and say, here, I need money, we're going to break everything, and we're going to do something that's great, and we're going to invest, and they've invested a lot in the US. I don't do politics or geopolitics, it's a little bit of geopolitics, but I don't do politics in there, that's just what happened. And the Vision Fund was for 4 or 5 years a force of massive destruction of financing in the United States, because as soon as the Vision Fund arrived, we had startups who were a little sexy and who said we need $1, $2, $3 billion, and if it was really interesting, the Vision Fund arrived, he said no, 2, 3, come on, we'll give you $15 million, that way you'll have the cost of the franchise, and you'll be able to go. And as soon as the Vision Fund arrived and he put the package, the other investors said, okay, there are 6 startups on the market, Vision has invested in it, it is she who will have 10 times more money than all the others. What are we doing? We have to follow. There is no way not to follow. I'm really barely caricaturing, it's really the mechanisms that have passed. So the best of the best startups, we've seen it in mobility, we've seen it, we still see it today in artificial intelligence and in all the sectors that are hot in fashion. It was really driven by a major opportunity effect, because someone arrived with a huge package of money and said, okay, they're the ones who will win, because they're the ones we finance the most. And when I was telling you earlier that what is really important to me, I was thinking of understanding when we say tech, it's the network effects. It's that these network effects, once they are set up, once we have an Uber in 30 American and European capitals, there is not a Lyft behind. There is not a Spabaloo.com behind either, there will just be an Uber. Because we, customers, will not have to navigate between 36 applications. Of course, we are all very tech-savvy and smart. So many of us here at Blinds, we have super elaborate strategies, I imagine, but in reality the heart of the market does not do that. There's one who wins, you have your photos of your children on Facebook, do your research on Google, etc. I'm knocking open doors. This effect that looks quite simple, it is important to understand, and it is so simple that I think we forget it a lot. And when we have a WeWork that is cracking up, when we have a Tyrannos, which is a scientific scam, when we have an Uber that has its own pans too, on several levels, and when Facebook has been summoned how many times now before the US Congress? 3, 4, 5 times, we don't know anymore, and then 10 times, 15 times, what will it change? I was also saying yesterday, we haven't heard from Google, so they are very happy, the scandals are elsewhere, we don't watch them, they do their thing quietly, but we have these somewhat catastrophic effects that appear in the markets, and we now have a real feeling of distrust that is justified in relation to these big tech players. Why did we escape it in Europe? Because we don't have any. We must not fool ourselves. We would have had exactly the same effects if we really had big tech players in Europe. What does that mean from a macroeconomic point of view for me? Because what interests me is the coming years. We had about 10 years, from 2007 to today, when we had a real runaway effect on tech. So 2007 minus 2008, tech, as I defined it, has been a financial safe haven in which, after the subprime real estate crisis in the United States, which hit us a little late. People postponed all their investment capabilities, and it paid off. If you invested in tech in 2008-2009, today, the ones you invested, you will have brought a lot of money. Trump was elected, the Dow continued to explode quietly. Finally, it is very robust. We can think what we want about Trump. In the end, the scholarship is happy, the tech is doing well, and so far, it's going well. There is a real chance that it will stop, that it will arise, but in general it does not arise calmly. In general, when we talk about finances, it explodes and it depolymerizes very, very quickly. When there start to be big fish leaving, things disappear very, very quickly and the market collapses. Then he leaves again, but the market collapses for a while. I don't know if there's going to be an explosion of some kind of bubble. There will certainly be a real deflation of the tech markets. And what's going to happen, because we're fine with it in Europe, is probably that we're going to have a little bit of reaction time in Europe compared to all this. Do you understand what I mean? If the American market starts to slow down and be a little in deflation, as we were quite late, we may have a chance to regain our footing and impose values and bring things. Where I am not a super optimistic person, the difference between optimists and pessimists, that in general pessimists are better informed, I think it will still take us a while to understand that we have an opportunity and that we will react only in 3-4 years in Europe, and that the Americans have already left, have already recreated wind in their sails. But we have this opportunity. All the scandals that you see today are destabilizing effects that, since we are not leaders, ultimately concern us a little less. That's interesting. There is a second point that is interesting in the tech for good. If we keep the theme, it is that the for good, we still haven't touched it much. What has made a lot of money today is two models: advertising and home pizza delivery. Pizza, CD-ROM, the beginning of the 2000 years, etc., but home delivery and advertising are old professions, old business professions, which have been rejuvenated, which have made these financial gains in a massive way, and which have really been the businesses on which it was the easiest to capitalize by doing tech.
Ces plus-values financières d'une façon massive et qui ont été vraiment les business sur lesquels c'était le plus simple de capitaliser en faisant de la tech.
You have not seen big revolutions in the medical field. You have not seen dematerialized care pathways. Google doesn't do that. It didn't interest them. Neither does Facebook. Why? Because it's hard, because it's complicated, because it's technical, because there are experts in the middle, because there are hard skills. Not that there are none in tech until today, but we are on just professions that are marginally more complicated, more difficult to make money produce. So they didn't go. And they're not going to go until they have a reason to go. Do we have a reason to go today? Are these things that are going to appear as opportunities? There is a less strong message that I have. It is that, if there is no economic opportunity, there will be no for good. It's not cynicism, it's pragmatism. As long as there is no economic reality at the key, there will be no for good that will be behind. And can we see these economic realities appearing on our markets? I'm going to resume, that's why I took notes. It's so as not to forget the big topics that we had during the debates. We talked a lot about design, and we talked a lot about the influence of design on tech, and what could design be better used for in tech, etc. So this is an interesting topic, because suddenly we could say to ourselves, for example, if we want to regain a foothold in these digital markets, to be a powerful player in Europe, or powerful players in Europe, we need good design. Let's define a design definition. We can do it in a lot of ways. Do we need good design to do this? Yes, we always need good design. So the question is it's a little soft. But what does good design mean? So the designers will explain to you, we went from the moment when we made beautiful packaging, to the moment when we made a beautiful experience. Then we now have emotional design. So we are increasing in value in design more and more. And now we're talking about value design. All this is great. And we were closing on this discussion earlier in plenary. And we were saying, but if the solution is to have a real design of value, that is to say we follow the designers in their logic, but isn't it just a company job to have values? Is this a job as a designer? Is it honest? Is it fair to ask a category of people in the company who can be leaders? We have more and more designers who are key leadership and VP positions in large groups, not too many in Europe, but is it honest to tell them, is it your problem now to bring the values of the company?
Mais est-ce que c'est honnête de leur dire, c'est votre problème maintenant d'amener les valeurs de l'entreprise?
It's a little weird. We wouldn't ask it from engineers, we wouldn't ask it from financiers. And if we actually follow this discussion a little bit, we'll realize pretty quickly that today you take, I like to do that, you take, the mission statement, the mission of the company. Our mission is to improve living conditions, the benefit of our customers, our shareholders, safety, quality, etc. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything.
Ça veut rien dire.
No one says otherwise. You take any mission statement like that, from most major groups, you try to say the opposite of what they say there. It doesn't mean anything. We're going to destroy value. We're going to be dangerous to our customers. We're just going to be unpleasant. No one says that. So when you say that you want to be with your customers, that you are listening, you are customer-driven. Who can afford not to be customer-driven? It's just that you're bad, okay. So you don't say anything if you just say we pay attention to the customers. What are your values? Are you really valuable? And it's disarming. I work with a lot of big groups, and again for a very long time, there is not really a clear value. Let's take Amazon, also discussion that we had, I repeated discussions that we had. Are there values in Amazon? No, there is no value. What are Amazon's values on the market? There is nothing that is hard. Is Amazon able today to say, because we have values, we will, for example, refuse to deliver to you more than once a week? Our business is to send you parcels at home. A big part of Amazon is that. But because we have values about ecology, inclusion, sustainability, everything that it tells, we decide that we don't want to send you more. We can send you 10 stickers, but only once a week. We set a limit. Twitter, we only refresh it for you once a minute, no more. Otherwise you are too much like hamsters under crack. It is not possible. And our values mean that we don't want to. You don't see that. You don't see limitations imposed on anyone's business model, because it just typed in values. You see it today in public service, you see it in certain types of companies that are a little bit exotic, but you see it quite little. Or maybe it's really because there are regulations, there are laws that impose, that put constraints. And this is a deficit that we have. Because if we want to put laws and forms of regulation because we know that private companies will not have them by themselves, or they lobby, they impose their own standards. This has been the industry's game for a very, very long time. If there is no regulation of this, it goes in all directions. We can see it, I don't want to shoot at ambulances, but we can see it with Boeing at the moment, which is not a digital company, even if they use a lot of digital tools, it's not tech business models, digital, it's an extremely technological company, we understand each other well in what I'm telling you, but lo and behold, they have made sure, for quite a few years now, to escape a lot of regulatory mechanisms, which were mechanisms that were safety for everyone. That's what we see in tech today. So obviously, there are no people who explode in flight with their browsers, it happens quite a bit, but you know what happens with it. This is a difficulty. The United States, today, has not chosen to reimpose laws. So we are armed with our little GDPR flag. Well, it's there, it's useful for a little bit, we shouldn't spit on it too much, because otherwise we don't have much. We have Germany who decided that it was not permissible to talk about Nazis and SS on Twitter and on social networks, and strangely, it was folded in a few months. Twitter found a way to regulate, to make it not appear. If you want to avoid having two extremist discussions on Twitter, use a VPN and make Twitter believe that you are based in Germany. You will see, your Twitter feed will mysteriously become extremely less victim of extremist comments, if you are a victim of this on your Twitter feed. So we have ways of acting in terms of regulation, and in terms of geostrategy. What is striking to me is that we, Europe, are the second world market. We are the second largest market in the world in terms of population size. We weigh more than 500 million people. You define Europe as you want, either purely Europe, or Schengen. Well, we have several definitions, but we are in any case more than 500 million people. The United States is vaguely 350,000 people. On network effects that are exponential effects, we are stratospheres above what the American market should be. Except that we are not well connected together, we are not well organized. I'm not speaking for a European government, I'm not talking about politics at that level, but I'm really talking about regulating laws on the digital economy that are put in place in a coordinated way, and that are a real power account against the United States. What the United States loves to make us forget is that we are a bigger market than they are, and we are really essential to the US economy, and we are going to be more and more so. This is a huge asset that we have and that we activate quite a bit, because we like to fight with these idiots of Italians, these Caspi of Germans, the English. They have been bothering us for a long time, now they are coming out, we are almost glad that they are leaving. And these divisions, really, are extremely counterproductive. The first market being China, obviously. If I come back to design, I think there is a real discussion about design, but for me it is a discussion that is technical. There are many things to do, there are many values to be created around design. We can very well find advantages in being better designers in Europe than in the United States. But at the end of the story, the fight is not there. The tool for me, design, is a tool like engineering, science, or tech. We're pretty good at all these tools, but we're missing something that really takes over, and that creates a dynamic, and that activates these tools in a much clearer way. And we didn't find that. I think we didn't find our wind on it, and we have to start looking for it. I was also listening yesterday. It's a very modest discussion, but I was listening to what Marie Evan, who is on the Discount Executive Committee, was saying yesterday, and who was speaking. So well, she was saying good things about discount, that's what's normal, it's fair play, but it was really interesting. She explained the action that discount had on its ecosystem, with startups. Since the time we have been talking about open innovation, etc., it may not be things that are extremely sensational for people who do innovation every day, but it is things that are practical, that are there, and that are also a way of managing the ecosystem, creating momentum, creating mass around digital activities. We were also listening to Al Golia earlier, who was talking about how they scaled up their search API on the planet. These are interesting things, and giving resources, tools, and allowing these companies to pick up speed, to differentiate themselves, strategically, at the French level, at the European level, is creating counterfeits to the American tools that we all consume, because they work fantastically well. So, when I say that too, I'm being quite pragmatic again, on the economic part. I'm trying not to tell you that if we regulate, it's going to be fine, because it's not. It will help, we need it, we must not forget it, but we must have approaches, I think, that are multifactorial, and that attack the big problem that we have now had for 10 years on several levels. The discussion in the United States at the moment, then there are the elections. Strangely enough, both Republicans and Democrats agree enough to take the subject of, you must have heard it, break them up. Let's break them. Let's break the monopolies. There we really have the feeling that in the United States they really want to go break their feet to Facebook, Amazon, others, and make them a little calmer. And they're starting to understand on both sides of the fence that these big groups here too, it's been great for the Dow Jones, it's been great for the S&P 50, but it's sterilizing the market now. Because as soon as there is a startup that is a little interesting, Facebook buys it and it disappears from the market. What happened in the 90s with Microsoft was an extremely interesting example. I've had a lot of discussions on this topic there in the halls. Microsoft was not destroyed in the 90s. Microsoft was attacked as a monopoly, and Microsoft had to defend itself. The net result of that is that Microsoft has been slowed down. It didn't kill them, they still made the money, they grew, but not as fast. They have lost market share progressions, they have not lost market share. And while they were slowed down, the game calmed down a little, and other companies appeared. On the look from the side of which I told you, I am in China quite regularly. There was a big boom on electric vehicles in China. 6 months ago, the Chinese government said, okay, now you, private operators, private investors, you stop investing in electric vehicles. Why? Because it's overheating. And we don't want that. We want to keep a level of competition between market players that is relatively okay, to be sure that we remain in a growth dynamic over the medium term, which is correct, and that we do not have Uber-type effects, with one who will win, which will then stifle our long-term progress on the market. That's interesting. As a result, we are completely the opposite of a liberal economy, etc. It is an economy absolutely regulated by power, but with a strategy of saying, in order to be able to create a strong economy and earn a lot of money, we put a bogeyman regulation on the market by saying you stop investing. Yes, but no. And when the Chinese government tells you no, you don't raise your hand to say but yes, yes, really we're going to do it. I mean, it's something that's not possible. We Europeans are not on a solution that will be the American one. We would certainly not be on a solution that is the Chinese one. But what is our solution to us? And here too, how do we create a logic that is a European logic in relation to this? No answer today. We have a beginning of an answer. Finally, we have a person at the European Commission. We have a European Commissioner for Competition who is Margaret West Archer, who is absolutely a Robocop of the thing, who is brilliant, who is hyper-technical, who is very intelligent. She's a little lonely, we'll see what it can give. We also had a discussion, so we had Stephen Fadden, who is someone from Google, who came to talk a little bit, and Google is not a monolithic company. There are many cells in Google. There are many employees who also really want not to be insulted in San Francisco, when we know that they work for Google. Facebook, it's too late. Those at Google say they're good, but we wouldn't really like to become really completely like Facebook. And there are a lot of parties internally Google, who are campaigning to try to find values. There is one thing that is interesting, is that, well, today Google, we can think that it is a bit like the great American Internet. Why not? It is rather not wrong for now, but we could very well imagine that if we were a minimum organized in France, Germany, or Europe, we could very well tell Google, you stop serving the general public, now live. There is no more Google search in Europe, for Philippe Méda, for Robert Boudou, for Micheline Jacquard. It's no longer possible. On the other hand, what we're going to do is that you're going to serve us a government search API, and then it's going to go through a national architecture to deliver Google Insight search. Except that you don't have all the data anymore. You don't know that it was Philippe Méda who was looking for something embarrassing, compromising, or just looking for a pizza last night in Lyon. You don't know anymore. You will know about Lyon that there has been such a volume of research, that this has happened. But we put a kind of filter, a level of anonymization of what is going to happen, and you no longer become a company B2C, you become a company B2G, business to government. Why? Remember, we are 550 million people, because we want it to happen like this. I'm not saying that this is a simple discussion, it certainly doesn't take place in a startup weekend or in a hackathon, it may take time. But what I'm just saying is, if we tried to have discussions of this type, if we tried to understand that we have this negotiating power, and that at some point, we are faced with actors who are relatively rational, from an economic point of view, which makes it very unpleasant in some cases, but they have an economic rationality. If we touch on economic rationality, or on preventing them from realizing their economic rationality as they would like, we have the negotiating power. I think that we are really victims of this misunderstanding today on several levels. One thing that is also happening that is in the tech for good, I think a problem that has been proven is that I was talking about Algolia, I was talking about possible counterfeits, to increase the power of companies in our ecosystems to us Europeans. It works relatively well, with two big problems. The first problem is that it works relatively well on one or two first rounds of the table, a Series A, or even a Series B, for startups. And as soon as we have to switch to C-Series, and therefore become really strong in terms of business, we are blocked.
on est bloqué.
Because our startups, I live in Amsterdam, which I don't talk about, I don't do French bashing on the subject, our French, German, Dutch startups, etc. they all play in their course. The French tech. That's my subject of, I put a euro back in the thing and I go there every time. The French tech, Lyon, French tech, Grenoble, French tech, Saint-Étienne, do we all do them? There you go, all competing. Extraordinary. Does a startup from Grenoble have the right to come to Lyon? Especially not. What a horror. We gave them 20,000 euros in Grenoble. It should especially not be that they had created 2 jobs in Lyon. Disaster. I like it. We really have to feel strong to do the bag race like that. Today, if we are not able to have startups that are developing at a European level, I think we have really blown our brains out on the subject, for reasons that are absolutely hateful. You are all an hour, 2 hours away by flight from 6 capitals. Today, the French market, it has many advantages. It is well financed. Moreover, the BPI, the most powerful sovereign wealth fund in Europe, so it is a big advantage that we have. It's better than Singapore. It's relatively better than the United States, for a lot of reasons. But we are doing our development in Lyon, then we are doing Rhône-Alpes, and then we are doing Paris, then we will do Berlin, and one day we will go to the US. Now, in step 2, we're already dead. We don't have that development time. This is something that doesn't percolate. It doesn't cross the brain barrier of most legs, for reasons that are absolutely mysterious to me. We have this superpower of having 6, 7, 8 big culturally different markets, which means that if it doesn't go fast in France, it may go super fast in Spain, because the market is not exactly the same. This is an advantage. If you have spent funding in Lyon, there may be currently funding on AI in Berlin that will interest you. You have the right to go there. It's called a European passport. But no, obviously, it's too easy. Sorry, that was my little personal pension on the thing. We have to manage to activate it, and the networks, the big public, parapublic innovation networks, the private accelerators that we all know, love to do this bag race, where they are each on their little square meadow, trying to make their small startup in their little corners, doing small fundraising, and hoping that one day someone bigger will arrive. And it is. The startups that survive this, which is already complicated, their real way out when they get big is to do an IPO in the United States. Because the stock market in the United States, to do fundraising, to do IPO, sorry, if you don't do it in the United States, it's stupid. Europe is not wired enough to do that. You are not going to do it in China for reasons, I hope, relatively obvious. You're not going to do it in Japan either. You could, but right now it's complicated. The only way out from above is to make an IPO in the United States. And you look at all the big groups that have been created over the last 20, 30 years on tech, they have gone through an IPO in the United States. And that, again, is a problem. That means that we, on the side of the speculative financial wall ecosystem, we don't do this job. And we refuse to do it. I try to align both the problems and also the positive sides. I mean, I'm not saying we just have to snap our fingers, but we're just not far from being able to do this. We have all the tools on hand. The credo that I really have is that we say all this, we have all the skills we need. I'm not sure we have all the logic we need. So it's true that there are more designers in the United States, in Silicon Valley, than here. Our good engineers go to Silicon Valley because that's where the money is. We have something to capitalize on all this. The simplest and most effective notion is really to understand that we are a massive market, we are the second largest market in the world, and that anything that can lead us to understand this culturally and use it culturally is what will serve us the most to regain power over the United States. After that, I don't know if digital companies, digital giants that would start to exist in Europe, would be more for good than American giants, but they would be more European. So I think that culturally, they would still be a little closer than us. And since we also have a public sector that is very developed, unlike the United States, in all European countries, we would also have this opportunity to say what the BPI is not doing yet, but we could imagine, we could dream that the BPI would start doing it when they say we are going to finance deep tech. You saw, by leading in deep tech finance. We finance scientific intelligence. We stop making pizza deliveries, especially because we haven't arrived, but we're getting back to doing what we did in the 80s, that is to say financing technology transfer. But that's pretty good, it's interesting. This is a European field of work. The United States did not do this. We have a huge opportunity on this. If we start having digital biomedical champions, if we start having legal tech champions, if we start having digital finance champions. We haven't had anything to do on the US side since PayPal. Not entirely true, but we haven't had much. We have a whole field of possibilities that we don't explore. And in the somewhat short side without a bag, which we also like to do, I think, and which is absolutely deleterious, we are what we want in the innovation networks in France. What do we want? We want to make our search engine French. We want to do our Facebook French. We want to do our French eBay. All right, I'll let you roll it out. What if we let this go? If we did something else? If we regulated them a little bit? What if we went into the hard subjects? In all the discussions we've had, I'm just going to conclude, and then if you want to discuss a little bit, we'll have time to do it. In all the discussions, we've had a lot of interesting facets of discussions there over these 2 days, a day and a half, really full of interesting topics. And what strikes me, if I allow myself to give a little global friendly feedback, what strikes me is that every time I come to congresses, to events like Blend, which are very rich and which look at topics by design, by the business, by the technique, we actually see all the pieces of the puzzle that are there, and we think, yeah, indeed, well, really, just do it what? My problem is that I started doing innovation consulting, I did wind innovation, I did other things long before, but I did in the strict sense of innovation consulting from October 2007. In October 2007. Since October 2007, I've been hearing the same things all the time, and for now it's not activating. So I really think that what is happening is a bit of a media disaster with the tech people in the United States, and all the backlash that there is going to be on it. It may be an opportunity for us to realize it, to put the pieces of the puzzle together, and to start moving forward a little bit. I know well that we have Brexit, I know well that we have the rise of nationalisms in many countries, I know well that I am a very privileged person, because I can move my business and decide to move it to Amsterdam, because I don't have a factory, etc. I do a little bit what I want, because I speak a little English, it's a huge privilege. So I have a vision that is necessarily a little distorted, but I still see this possibility, and I still see that our European market for tech, business, design, economics, it is not far from gelling, structuring, existing, and really becoming, perhaps in 5 years, in the next 10 years, the second market on the planet. Just to finish, one chance we have is that if the United States breaks its mouth a little bit, and it creates a little bit of oxygen for us to achieve this and move forward, we have a real chance. It is that China, for now, does not need us too much. China is still on a huge domestic market that has not finished exhausting. We could discuss what they are doing and who are still impacting us today in a real way, but we certainly have 5 to 10 years before China comes, from a digital point of view, to put us under pressure. And we are being put under pressure on other topics. They produce 5 times more electric batteries than the United States. We may have a gigafactory in Berlin, there, which will arrive in 3, 4, 5 years. We're behind on a lot of topics, but on digital, China will still leave us alone for quite a long time, and I've been at it for a very long time. Chinese companies are very, very bad at making brands. They don't know how to make marks. We had Xiaomi who tried to get on the market, it wasn't very good. DJI, the drones, they have rather succeeded in their cost, but we have very few examples of that. It saves our asses for a long time. And the Chinese, but it's dangerous, because the Chinese are in no hurry, they are in a long time, they are certainly giving themselves 10 years to bend Europe, but on the other hand, step by step, calmly, they will go, they will crumble us, and the European market will be theirs at some point. It will be theirs or that of the US. We have 10 exciting years. As for me, I'm glad to be my age and to have my experience today, because maybe I could have bothered a little bit 2 or 3 years ago. But now we have 10 absolutely exciting years of changes that will happen, I hope for the good, and even being very pessimistic, I'm trying to believe a little bit, because it's still not very far to catch for us. Thank you. We have 10 minutes of questions. After that, we have to go back down to the plenary, if you want, or later. Philippe, quite simply, do you have any answers that you think would explain why entrepreneurs find it difficult to have this view of the European market as a whole? I'm giving you my opinion, I'm interested in getting your feedback on it. I was in a company that was in the construction market, and it turns out that the construction market, it does not have the same structure at all in Spain, Germany, and France. And when we tried to go to the other European countries, we were confronted with the fact that we thought that the European market was unique and that by speaking English, we would get by. And in fact, Europe is ex-local markets that potentially have, depending on the field in which they were, as many specificities? We completely agree. I've been struggling for years and I can't do it. With the few so-called Allegro public incubators in France, with whom I continue to work because they are proud of the public and I like it, it's not where I earn my living, but it interests me to tell them, stop, you take incubator, it's 0 to 12 months, startup 0 to 12 months after. In the first month, we take the startups and we do a crazy thing, we do a goofy thing, we will bring them to Ryanair. We will do what you want: Milan, Berlin, Lisbon. Something crazy. We vaccinate them, we do the polio test again, the yellow fever, whatever it takes, and we bring them to see that they have designers, that they have financiers, that they have engineers, that they have funds, that they have partnerships, that they have. We are with an incubator, so I succeed a little bit. We have the incubator in Toulouse start working with Telefónica in Barcelona.
L'incubateur de Toulouse commence à travailler avec Telefónica à Barcelone. Wow.
Something crazy. 3 years and 3 years of using them on the subject to achieve this. We were going there, objectively it took me 2 days of work, a little bit of luck, but Telefónica was super happy to see startups that come from Airbus and who bring them on Telefónica. It's orange if you want, and who bring them satellite tools to make telcos, etc. It works great. And the startups say, yeah, but we're just going to do a Skype. No, you're not going to Skype. You're going to lose a day, you're going to fly for 2 hours, you're going to land, take an Uber. Okay, we're making the American economy work. Too bad we're going there and you're going to chat with them for an hour. These links, they are not created and the idea is not the idea. That is to say that you are a startup, you are 12 months away from dying, you start, you are 12 months away from dying. Best case scenario. Okay, so what do you want to do now? Are you stubborn about the French market, which is objectively the most risk-averse on the planet? Not quite. After Japan. Okay? We are the most opposite market to change on the planet, on the side of large groups, mid-sized companies, SMEs, consumers. You are determined to make a change in this market or you have a chance to exist afterwards. And if you really want to do digital magic, you come and do it afterwards because you will have the means. And worst case, just go recruit your Estonian or German developer. We have supermarkets in Amsterdam. Instead of having people who are not effective, there and there, where you did not find them, they have already been all taken. Yeah, relocate your teams, just do that, but let's start something. Thank you.
Excuse me, excuse my English language, that is.
We can do it in English. I'm okay with that.
We have lion, we have to speak French.
Yeah, but in Europe as well.
Okay, cool. So you've lived in Amsterdam, you've worked in China, you're obviously French. Where do you recommend the next generation live? Where would your next ideal city be to live?
Ideally, in a big city where you can afford the rent. Because if you can, then your devs and your marketers can do that as well. So you don't go to London, you don't go to Frankfurt right now, because the people from London and finance are in Frankfurt and the rent are too high. You don't go to Amsterdam right now, maybe in the next month, but then that's it. You don't go to Paris. I mean, that's the worst place on the planet to start a startup. That's the worst. Really. And on top of that, Paris is no one talking English in Paris, no one speaks English in Paris. Why would you go there? It means that if you succeed to a certain level, then you are at a glass ceiling because you don't go across Europe anymore, or it's just a burden now. You have to deal with that as an extra thing. I'm not a nice guy. When I'm looking at a startup, D1, the startup is created. If the website is not a .com, if I enroll my logic, they're dead. And they are. 98% of the time. FR, UK, Co, you're dead. NL, you're dead, you're dead. You are thinking country, you're thinking region. Your plan is to ramp up from your city to your region, to your country, and then maybe you are going to export. You don't export to Europe, you are in Europe. You don't have to export to Europe.
On the property price, Leon. Leon seems to be.
Leon might be a nice deal. I don't know enough. I believe it can be a nice deal.
There are a lot of co-working spaces in Leon, so it is striking to me. That suggests maybe property is cheaper, I don't know, but
if a 25 years old out of school cannot live in downtown Lyon, then don't. Sorry about that, guys. I'm 50. I can't afford to. I met okay money. I can live in Lyon, but I'm not the target. I'm not a young dev. I'm not a young designer. Where are they? Go there. Connect them. Sorry, we have to go because I have a duty to fulfill. I have things to do in plenary, so we'll stop. Twitter, where afterwards we can continue the conversation. Thanks for being there, and I'll see you later.